glad y'all are tuning in today. I thought I'd do something different. So I'm gonna go take a stroll while I have my video person, Lila, videoing for me. So if this turns out great, it's because of her. If it doesn't turn out good, it's because I didn't edit right. So, you know, that's just how winning goes. So, how many of you overuse certain emojis when you text? You get in, you text, and you just love sending emojis. You may overuse, 2 or 3 different ones. For me, I love just the smiley face. I love the thumbs up. With my love of puns, I like to send the innocent angel face every so often. Or even the laughing one, because you gotta laugh at times. And instead of putting LOL, it's more fun to put the face that's crying because they're laughing so hard. And it shows the beauty of emojis in that you can use emojis to portray what you're feeling without having to type it out. And there are a few emojis that I really don't use a lot. It's the ones that signify being shocked, being surprised, and a lot of times it comes in a bad way, that maybe somebody's gotten sick or maybe somebody has gone to the hospital. Lila, do not hold it with just one hand. Thank you.
Sorry.
But I'd venture to say that most of the time, these shock emojis are sent along with text. Like I said, that is maybe not a happy shock, but a sad or an upset shock. And something that catches us off guard, something just seem to come out of nowhere. Well, it leads to the next question. Ever experienced something like that in life? Something that simply rocked your world, you really weren't looking for it, you really didn't see it coming, but it just came and it just happened. It was kind of like, maybe you got news, you had a family meeting and your parents are splitting up. I can remember when I found that out about my parents when I was in elementary school, and just how my world just didn't make sense at that time. Maybe a friend, a close friend, a family member, or the family member of a close friend has received a diagnosis that no one was expecting. Jamie's cousin her husband is in the hospital right now fighting COVID-19, fighting coronavirus. He's in ICU. So if you think about it, pray for Fred as he is battling this illness. He is thankfully not on a ventilator right now, but he is struggling to breathe. So maybe it's news like that, because I found out just a couple of days ago. And it was something that just kind of didn't know how to react. Maybe you were dumped. Maybe it's just a fact of life. Maybe you got dumped and you didn't know how to think, or maybe you went and broke up with somebody and their response was, okay, I feel better now. And you're like, wait, what? You were just having sympathy for me. Maybe you found out your best friend was gossiping about you. And you didn't know how to act. You didn't know what to think. And because of that, it's difficult for us to know how we'll respond, through these painful moments. The thing is about them, they come out of nowhere and they hit us when we're not looking for it. And because of that, it's difficult to know how we would feel. Sometimes we're surprised by how well we handle it, or maybe how well we don't handle it. Maybe sometimes we're surprised about what God does through the situation, or maybe we're surprised that it feels like God's not there at all. But because we're all wired differently, we experience hurt differently. But that doesn't change the fact that hurt hurts. And when life hurts, we all find ourselves wondering what to do next. And that's why we're in this series, What to Do When You Don't Know What to Do. See, that's why we're talking about Joseph. He's one of the most famous individuals in the Bible, much less the Old Testament. And he had a lot of family drama, kind of like what we talked about last week. 12 brothers in the family, Joseph and his older 11 brothers, You had 4 different moms. Their dad had 2 wives, and Joseph is the only kid to his dad's favorite wife. So Joseph was the favorite of the family, which really didn't bode well for family dynamics, as if the other things didn't really help either. But as his dad's favorite child, therefore he was given special treatment. He was given a special coat. We notice the coat of many colors, and on top of that, he was having dreams about his brothers and his family bowing down and serving him, worshiping him, paying homage to him. And you know, Joseph didn't add well to the drama of the family. He played a part in it because of his attitude and the way he just nonchalantly went around about it. His brothers certainly didn't care much for it, as Joseph was the favorite. And so you have this instance in Genesis 37 where Joseph has the dream about the wheat all bowing down. And of course, that didn't sit well with the family. And so we look in Genesis 37, we get a running start in verse 14 about this whole situation that's coming up. Then Israel said to him, Israel is Joseph's dad. Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are doing and bring word back to me. So already we see the 11 older brothers are out in the field. Joseph is at home. So he sent him from the Hebron Valley and he went to Shechem. A man found him there wandering in the field and asked him, what are you looking for? So this random man finds Joseph, this kid, wandering in a valley and says, dude, what are you doing? I'm looking for my brothers. I'm assuming there wasn't a lot of foot traffic at this moment in time because the guy instantly knew, oh, they've moved on from here. They're not here anymore. They've gone to Dothan. Now, you know, they can't just take back and say, hey, Dad, we're going to field number 4 over in Dothan Valley. You know, we're taking flock 3 through 7 over to the east side. You know, they just had to go do what they had to do. So Joseph set out after his brothers and found them at Dothan. And as they saw him from a distance, you start to see the attitude and the feelings of frustration and anger and jealousy towards him. Because it says they saw him from a distance, and before he reached them, the brothers plotted to kill him. And you sense their anger in verses 19 and 20. They said to one another, oh look, here comes the dream expert. So now, come on, let's kill him, let's throw him in one of these pits, and we can say a vicious animal got him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. So you already see the family dynamic that doesn't work here. So one of his older brothers, though, Reuben, thankfully he had a decent head on his shoulders, especially in this moment, because he, in the midst of plotting his brother's death, his conscience gets the better of him. And apparently they've spoken after a while. And in verses 21, 22, again we're looking in Genesis 37, when Reuben heard this, he tried to save him, being Joseph, tried to save Joseph from them. So Reuben said, let's not take his life. Let's not shed any blood. Throw him into the pit in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him. Because Reuben wanted to play the hero. He intended to rescue him and return to his father. He wanted to gain some brownie points, wanted to gain favor. So Reuben was like, dude, don't kill him. But in the back of his mind, he had an ulterior motive. I'm going to be the hero. I'm going to come back at midnight. I'm going to rescue him. And Dad, look who I found when I was back out in the field. I went back to find your son and my brother, and lo and behold, here he is. Well, thankfully, the brothers listened to Reuben. And when Joseph approached, they ripped the coat off of him and they threw him in a well. You know, if Joseph had had a cell phone at this time, I'm sure he would probably be texting a friend and going, you know, when your brothers tear up your jacket and throw you into a well. And there's probably a shocked face emoji going at the end of that text. Well, plans changed a little bit because in that moment they see, oh, here's some traders coming by. Traveling merchants, traveling salesmen, so to speak. And so Judah, another one of the brothers, suggested they sell Joseph to these traders. So long story short, they took Joseph's coat, dipped it in animal's blood. They sold Joseph to these traders, and then they went back home to tell Dad that an animal had caught Joseph and killed him. And so listen to verse 32. Again, Genesis 37, verse 32. They sent the long-sleeved robe to their father and said, "We found this. Examine it and tell us if it's your son's." Now this last line tells us everything that we need to know about the brothers' feelings about Joseph. Because they obviously knew the coat belonged to him. They obviously knew that it was his. But they didn't even say, "Hey, we think this is Joseph's robe." They said, "Check and see if this is your robe." Not Joseph's robe. This is our brother's robe. See if this is your son's. And so in the meantime, Joseph is riding off to Egypt with the traders, and I'm sure if he had his cell phone, he would send a text out that says, "Good news, I'm out of the well. Bad news, I've been sold to traders. Seriously, really sold." And another shocked emoji face. Maybe an anger face to go with it. Now I know I'm making light of this situation, but there was nothing light about it. There's nothing lighthearted about this. We can't imagine the fear. We can't imagine the uncertainty or the anger. We can't imagine the hurt that he felt. And the questions that were all swirling in his mind. Betrayed by his own brothers, by his own flesh and blood. This is clearly a prime example of what to do when you don't know what to do moment. You know, our stories are much different than Joseph's. But we all experience pain of some kind. We all have painful moments that catch us off guard. And so I want to look further into the story a little bit in Genesis 39. And there are 5 words that you will see through the entire story that God weaves through Joseph's life about how he protects and guides and cares for all of us as we see in Joseph's life. And it's these 5 words. It's in the very first part of verse 2 of Genesis 39. It says, "The Lord was with Joseph." 5 words. The Lord was with Joseph. Joseph didn't have a lot going for him. Yeah, he may have been Dad's favorite, but for all intents and purposes, you could call him a spoiled brat. His brothers didn't like him. He was in the pit, literally, and even less afterwards when Joseph was in despair and wondering how his life would turn out. He couldn't see the end like we can. We can go and read what happens and we can see how God works everything out. But right in the middle of it, Joseph couldn't see anything happening. He didn't really know what God was doing. And so we can try our best, but we'll never be able to imagine the emotions he was feeling in that moment. But see, here's some truths about this situation that apply to our lives as well. See, the truth is, Joseph's reality didn't change, but it was better because he knew he wasn't alone. The truth didn't mean that Joseph could see where the story was going, but he knew he wasn't entirely dependent upon himself. He knew he could trust God. But the truth didn't mean that Joseph could easily deal with the things that happened to him. It just meant that he knew he could rely on God and lean into him. It didn't mean that he had a reason or an explanation. He didn't have to figure things out by himself. You know, he had God that he could lean into. You see, when Joseph was in despair and wondering how life would turn out, he could rely on the truth that God was with him. It didn't change his situation, didn't change his reality. But what it did is it gave him perspective. It gave him the ability to see things differently. It gave him the knowledge and the peace and the comfort to know that God was going to be with him and working things out. And when life hands you shocking news and you don't know what to do, and I know this sounds cliche, but just keep in mind God's with you. It doesn't change the circumstance, but it can change our perspective. It can change how we view things. It can change the peace in our life from being one of overwhelmed and conflict and turmoil to one of peace and confidence, knowing that God is active even when we don't feel it, even when we don't see it. We have confidence in God being there. Knowing that God is with us may not change our circumstance, but it may change us, change our response, our attitude, change our words and our feelings. And it's easy to give into the hurt that experiences bring us. It's easy to let fear overwhelm. It's easy to have a lot of reasons why not to trust anyone. Maybe even reason to say, well, we can't trust God. But here's the thing. That's when our emotions get the better of us. That's when anger and despair. And we have to choose to say, God, I know you're with me. Even though it may not feel it, I know you are. And I'm going to trust you. When we know God is with us, the uncertainty of life doesn't get the last word. God does. And so here are some things that we can do in the meantime. Be real. There's a phrase called feel your feelings. Don't try to hide them out. Don't try to block them out. Don't try to act tough when you're broken. We've got to embrace our feelings when we feel confused, when we feel overwhelmed, when we feel hurt. We've got to express it. And we got to share it with God. We got to find those trusted people in our lives we can share it with. You see, our job isn't just to toughen up and move on. Wipe our shoulders off, dust ourselves off and move on. That's not our job. If we believe God is with us, then we should know that God is more than okay with our honest questions and our doubts and our fears. Second thing is remind yourself and each other, your family, your small groups, your closest friends, remind each other, remind yourselves that God is with you. Sometimes having someone say, don't forget where God is in this, is probably one of the best things we can be told. It's one thing for us to know it, but when somebody else says it and speaks it into our life, there's hope. Because in that moment, God is using that friend, or maybe using you as that friend, to remind each other that God is present. See, here's a spoiler alert. Things do work out for Joseph. But we know that because we can read the whole story of the Bible. We know the beginning to end of Joseph's life, but Joseph didn't know that when he was right in the middle of it. We can look back and see God in and through the different experiences and things in our lives. When we're right smack dab in the middle and we can't see the end and we don't know how it's going to work out, that's sometimes when the questions hit us the hardest. But see, Joseph held on to the one thing that we need to hold on to as well, the knowledge and the understanding that God is with us. In moments when life is the toughest, sometimes the simplest statements have the deepest truth. God is with you, and God is with me. Your story, my story, isn't over yet. Our life will be full of moments when we don't know what to do about the things that we're facing. Life will be full of moments when we want to insert the shocked emoji face into life. But in those moments, you need to know that when you don't know what to do, God is with you. And if you take anything out of this nice little stroll today that you've come with me on, it's this. When you don't know what to do, God is with you. Hope you guys have a great Sunday. Hope to see you here in a little bit when we gather for worship at 10:30. We're still in the seating arrangement, but we had a great turnout last week. It was great to see your faces. Look forward to seeing you guys again. Hopefully here in just a little bit. So, until then, I'm going to enjoy the rest of this walk, and Lila gets to turn the camera off and rest her shoulders.